Good morning, Rich.
Good afternoon, Pat.
So where you at today? You in Oxford or London or Southend by the Sea or
London today. Yeah, North London.
London today? Y'all have
Yeah.
such cool names over in England because one of the neat things about doing this is I get to see it shows all the cities and the countries that we're in. And, we're in like five different countries and, we're in like five cities in Japan. We've got people listening or you got friends in Japan?
No, I have no friends in Japan. So that's kind of amazing, really, that it's made its way over there.
Yeah, I thought so because I don't have any friends. I mean, I got friends around the world, but I don't have friends in Japan. I mean, I've
No.
done comedy in other countries, but I've never done the cheap trick live at Budokan. I don't think that, I don't think the young girls would show up for that. I think the name of the album would be Pat McCool, live in an empty theater talking to himself
Yeah.
because nobody likes you over here. So that was, but in England, I'm noticing all these really cool names like uh, Newcastle upon Tyne,
Yeah.
and it's like y'all name you name the cities, and then you mention the river that they're on.
Yeah.
You know,
So that will often be like such and such upon Thames, or, a lot of the little towns have that kind of name. I guess, because obviously you stole a lot of our names. But I guess I suppose it was necessary to knock a few syllables off there because obviously you're a different kind of people. That many syllables might confuse you. I'm guessing.
I said that, yeah, that's where you got Shakespeare's Stratford upon Avon. I never understood that because I thought it was cool. I was thinking of the town that I live by that I'm from has two rivers running by it, and I kept saying these cool names. I was thinking of going to talk to the mayor and seeing if we couldn't get a petition. We could be Hattiesburg upon Leaf kind of stand, but we shouldn't do that, right? It's
Nah, it's just. I think you stay in your lane. Yeah, that's what it's saying these days, isn't it? Stay in your lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of our lane, that's what brings me. We were gonna talk about the difference between church in the USA and church in England, and when you and I started going to church the first time, which was actually kind of humorous. But I had a little bit of an encounter that we're going to change the subject, and I appreciate you humoring me there. And speaking of our lane, it has to do with like college football. We are you familiar with college football in the United States?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's different how it is here. Here, like college sports are just not really like a big thing. Whereas I know for you guys, it's televised, and I think UT. I believe the college football stadium is 100,000 people, which is
Yeah,
bigger. That's bigger than our national stadium, Wembley.
yes.
So yeah,
And it's not just UT. There's two UTs actually that have 100,000 plus stadiums, and
yeah, that's
Alabama
crazy.
had 100, and LSU. I mean, it's in Penn State. There's a lot of stadiums that have 100,000 people because it's in the U.S. It's a big college is a big deal
Mm.
because what we do is it's either where we went to school. It's or we grew up liking them. We didn't really have to go to school. It could be something you did as a kid with your dad. It's a big deal to us because we have these 18, 23-year-old kids that go out and play the other school's 18 and 23-year-old kids. And if our 18 to 23-year-old kids beat theirs, it shows our superiority to that person just in life in general. Does that does that make sense?
Yeah, but we have the idea of competitive sports, like so that bit makes sense. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah, yeah, but
yeah,
we take it personally. You see, it's kind of a defining. It's the self-esteem thing. I know in England, you have football, but it's like FUTBOL or soccer.
Mm, yeah. So we have football. It's spelt the same. I think what you're thinking of is table football, but we spell it the same, but it's like with it's proper football. As opposed to obviously what you do is um a kind of weird hodgepodge of like rugby and some kind of sport where you require a lot of padding so you don't get hurt. And yeah,
Yeah.
different.
Well, it's because what I've seen of English football with soccer, we call it. here.
Yeah, it's
You
football.
have,
Yeah,
and you have huge stadiums over there, and it looks like you've got a bunch of guys that get out on the field, and you call it a pitch. For some reason, it's a field pitch.
yeah.
So they go out on the pitch, they run around for a few hours. The fans get drunk and sing, whoa, whoa, the whole time. And then eventually, the object of the game is to put the ball in the net. Eventually, the ball will go in the net, and the announcer's like, shocking kick, Nigel. And that's it. Like Man United beats Leeds 1-0. Riveting. That's
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. There's a bit of that. But I mean, it is different. Like when I was in America a few times ago, like it was Super Bowl weekend, and I thought, oh, I'll sit down and watch the Super Bowl. It just seemed to be like a really long ad break with like very short bits of some kind of sport sprinkled in occasionally.
It's a little bit about the money, but college football is as big as pro football to a lot, to a lot of us. Because, like I said, a lot of it, you tend to be a pro fan if you live near the bigger cities, urban areas, or that type of thing. College football is ingrained in you, man. It's like if you're in a state and you got two different teams in that state, and your neighbor or your friend goes to that other school and you go to this school, well, it's very important that your 18 to 23-year-old kids beat the 18 to 23-year-old kids from that school, because that will pretty much affirm that you've made better life choices. Do you see?
Yeah. I mean, it really makes sense now how you guys, especially at the moment, lead the world in like diplomacy.
That's it. Well, speaking of diplomas, I didn't get a diploma from the school that I went to, although I do think I hold the record for enrolling the most times and making the least amount of progress. So I think I'm recognized over there somewhere. And my team went 1-11 last year, so my self-esteem's lacking a little bit. But we tee it back up in about 3 weeks. But the reason I'm mentioning college football is there is it's such a big deal over here. We have these message boards that we go on, and this particular message board that I frequent it's thousands of guys from all over the country, and it's about college sports or college football, but surprisingly, that's probably one of the least topics that we talk about is actual sports. We talk about everything from politics, current events, what's going on in the world, people trying to be funny, really good information. I mean, if I get up and check my phone, if I get up and check my phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's an asteroid heading towards Earth, somebody on that board is going to have posted it. So it's kind of a cool place to hang out, especially for somebody like me who, when I'm not doing comedy, I don't have much of a life. So I go on there, and there are a lot of people on there. We have everything from the average Joe to the millionaire, to the average Joe that acts like a millionaire, to the average Joe that makes fun of the guy that acts like a millionaire, to neurosurgeon, HVAC guy, police officers, special forces, guys in finance, just all kinds of wide variety of people. It's like a big social club that people go on. And you got good guys, you got idiots, just like every club. And people are trying, they're trying to be funny or having discussions. And as men do when they get together, and some women to get together, people always want to put themselves in the best light. You really don't want to say things or do things that make yourself look like you're failing at life. And there are guys on there that you recognize that post an awful lot. It's not just people like me that occasionally go on because I'm, not giving up immaturity without a fight and trying to be funny when I'm off stage. So you have guys you recognize, and and in your mind, you don't know their names, but they have like a handle, and you know who, oh, there's somebody that you've seen a lot, and this guy seems like a good guy, this guy's a smart guy, this guy's funny, this guy's all, this type of thing. And again, nobody's going to post anything on there to try to make themselves look like they're failing at life. But last week a guy came on that I recognized his handle, seen him on there before, and he would be what you would classify as one of the good guys. one of the guys you think was doing life well. And let me read to you how he started his post. Last Friday at 7:34 a.m. This is a guy that's been on this board for years, just seems to be living life, punching life in the face. Seemed like a successful, happy-go-lucky guy. I think he got married about a year ago. The post starts, I'm an alcoholic. The body of the post. I went to my first meeting yesterday evening. This has been a hard process to begin. My body detoxed yesterday, and I'm still going through it today. The final straw was drinking an entire bottle of liquor Wednesday morning before even leaving the house. I went to work, and an hour into it could barely stand. A coworker drove me home. Never been more embarrassed on my life. Remember the word embarrassed here. I am fortunate to not have completely thrown everything I've worked so hard far away, and my boss said he isn't ready to give up on me, even though I told him he should fire me. He offered me grace in a time I deserved none. I will beat this. The withdrawals are rough, but I'm really ready to be done. I'm disgusted with myself. Remember that. And what I've become. I'm asking for some prayers as I battle through this, and I know I'm not going to let it beat me. I'm too young. I just had my 1-year wedding anniversary, and we were looking at buying a house. I'm just tired of lying to everyone and myself.
Mm.
And I noticed, let's say that Rich, and I noticed at the bottom within an hour or two, this post had 327 some odd likes, which is a huge amount of people liking a particular post. And the reason I said focus on the embarrassed and the disgusted with myself, because it sounds like this guy's coming out and admitting he's a failure and that he's losing. But I read this post to my wife, and my wife is one of the wisest, most spirit-filled people that I've ever met in my life. And she looked over and said, man, can you imagine how strong he had to be to post that?
Yeah, absolutely,
So
Pat.
at a moment this guy thinks he's admitting that he's a failure and he's a loser, he's actually doing one of the strongest things he's ever done, and he's actually showing how strong he is. And I just wanted to bring it to you. Not only are you an addiction specialist, but you are now 13 years sober. Anyway, comments and advice, tips as he's just beginning this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Initial thoughts. He's admitted he's got a problem. He's gone to a meeting. That's huge. Like that's like no small thing. It's the first step, and I'll talk about the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous a little bit in a minute. But that first kind of teetering step into a recovery program is, it's hard. It's like a scary thing to walk into a room full of people. You may know people in there, you probably don't. There's a different language in there, a different culture. It can feel very ashamed. One can feel very ashamed walking in there, and embarrassed and disgusted. They're two words that really mean shame, for me. So that's a huge thing, and your wife's on the money. It's like that. It takes a huge amount of courage to, particularly publicly like that, to come out and say something of that nature. So yeah, lots of really good stuff happening there. It won't feel good right now, but it is good, and like sometimes gifts come wrapped in really strange packages, and that kind of day one, the detox, that rock bottom experience of going to work, having drunk a bottle of liquor, there potentially, guarantees a lot of it will depend on what he does from now on, but like potentially that will be one of the best days of his life because it'll be the day that everything changes. So that's kind of first thoughts, and then yeah, I mean, there's more to say. I can say more on that, but what do you make of what I've just said? What do you think about that?
I totally agree. The guy is he's showing how strong he is on that day, and then you just mentioned walking into the meetings,
Mm,
and you might know or you might not know. This was the thing that was surprising. Uh, as you know, my brother and sister were both alcoholics, and my wife would take my brother to the, he couldn't drive, so she would take him to the AA meetings. And she said, when you walked in, she said it was packed. And she said, I knew people. There were doctors. There were prominent people in town. There was every walk of life that was in there. She said, you would just be surprised. So he may feel lonely and like you're the only one doing this, but there are far, far more people that are going through this than you realize. I remember when I was, I mentioned it in my book, when I was 16 and I got a DUI, I went to a MASAP meeting called Mississippi Alcohol Safety Awareness Program to get my driver's license back. And I joke about how me and a friend, matter of fact, it was after a college football game. I decided that, that I would try to go through about 8 red lights down the main street. And I go into this meeting and we look in the back of the room and we see a lot of our friends' parents. And these are prominent people in town. These are doctors, but, not just the doctors are prominent, but that's all walks of life that were in those meetings. So this guy, and anybody that's listening and going through this or has family members, it's a much bigger club than you think it is.
Oh, 100%. And you got to recognise, right? Like, it's like addiction does not discriminate. Like, I've worked with people, professionally, and sponsored people in 12-step programs and stuff like that have, their sneakers, sorry, have been worth more than my car. And I've worked with people that like literally had like nothing, that were like low bottom, like street level drug addicts, but like addiction doesn't discriminate. It might look a bit different in some cases, but it doesn't discriminate. So yeah, you'll have the full spectrum of society in there. There's a meeting in East London, and it's a really interesting meeting. Where it sits is it sort of sits on the cusp of the financial district, right? Which your Wall Street, right? It sits on the cusp of the financial district, but then a load of much poorer, like infinitely poorer areas. So you'll go in that meeting and you might be sat next to a hedge fund manager, yeah, on one side, and on the other side you'll have like a guy who's come out of, we call them estates, you would call them housing projects, yeah. And and everyone in between, so it's, yeah, like that point's so important to remember. It's like addiction doesn't discriminate. Yeah, that it's like prominent people, not so prominent people, everyone in between, man, without a doubt.
You went through the 12, because I know people that have gone through the 12-step program, and people very successfully. It seems to be one of the most successful paths out there. That's what you started off, because we're a faith-based podcast, but you started off in the 12-step program.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that really is what brought me to faith, right? Because you go in there and there's an emphasis, a significant emphasis on a higher power, right? So what that guy,
That's in the 12-step program, in any 12-step program.
Yeah, 100%. It's like built in. So the roots of the 12-step program are that, started in 1936 by Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith. They were both like heavyweight Christians. Yeah, so I've been to Bob's house in Akron, Ohio, and like that, they've set it up kind of as it was when he lived there in like the 30s and through until the 40s. I think that house was in the family's possession until the 50s, if I remember the history right. So, like, you can see where Bob Smith sat reading, like reading his Bible. He was insomniac, reading his Bible, reading books like The Varieties of Spiritual Experience, right? So it had very Christian roots. How it's been translated over the years is that has broadened out to accept kind of all faiths and none. And, I think that kind of open access is really important. But for me, the journey was through working the 12 steps and kind of coming to believe in the presence of a higher power, in that higher power's ability to help me grow and change and heal. That was what led me to the church, after some years. So, yeah, there's a heavy emphasis on that stuff. I mean, I worked through the steps. Really, step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. It's odd. It's a funny paradox, Pat, but like in that admission of powerlessness, that admission of defeat, which I hear in your guys' post. And if you're listening, like, I really want to just applaud you and affirm you and encourage you and tell you, like, there is a way out. It can get better. You know, it did for me. But that post is an admission of powerlessness. Yeah. That post is like, I can't do this. Yeah. Like, this has got me licked. Yeah. Like, under my own power, left to my own devices, reliant on my own thinking and decision making. I'm drinking a bottle of liquor before I go to work, getting driven home by a coworker, and telling my boss that he needs to fire me. You know, that's where my best thinking gets me. So there's an admission of powerlessness in that. And the paradox that I mention is when you admit you're powerless, you open the door to the possibility of finding some power. But until you've admitted you haven't got any, it's very difficult to go looking for any. So that's kind of the first step. And look, I mean, look, your guy, like, I'd say, look, go to a lot of meetings. Yeah. Go to a lot of meetings. Meeting makers make it. Yeah. Get a sponsor, work the 12 steps. It's the 12 steps that, I mean, that's like, it's not even a podcast. It's like several books you could write about the people's experiences they have and stuff like that. But it's like, like, summed up very simply, it's like trust God, clean house, help others. You come in, you realize you're beaten, develop a relationship with some kind of higher power, and just even like the fledgling, just the little kind of embers of a belief that this thing can help me. Then you cleaning house is like going through a process of, like, you kind of clear out all of the guilt, the shame, the remorse. You acknowledge the hurts that you've perpetrated to people. You look at what you've done to them. You look at what you've allowed people to do to you. You really take responsibility for the shit that you've done, and what all that kind of darkness and muck that you're carrying. You know, you change. You make some restitution. That's cleaning house, and then helping others is like kind of carrying the message to other people that it's possible to do so, right? And there's different ways to do that, but it's like, essentially, it's like what we're charged to do in the Great Commission. Yeah, like, we get saved, right, through our faith. Right? We get washed clean, we get forgiven. Somewhere in that, maybe we learn to forgive ourselves, right? But then the Great Commission tells us that we go out and we carry that message to other people, that we try and create disciples. So it's very Christian based. If you've got a faith, your guy mentions prayers at the end of his post. So that suggests that he has a faith, which is a huge asset. It's not essential when you walk through the doors. It's a huge
I just wanted
asset.
to mention that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I've
let
got to
me ask
say.
you this that I've wondered. One, when you're talking about faith, addiction, it used to be the church, they would say, you know, put your faith in Jesus and get over this and stop calling it addiction, disease, whatever. It doesn't matter what disease, you can't control yourself. I've heard a pastor that I respect, and I love this guy. He's passed now, but he gave a sermon on the oh, now they go to therapy, they call it well, I totally disagree with him on that particular point. That was the old school thinking. It's something you can't control, and like you said, this guy and what you did 13 years ago, you admitted you had a problem, and then that's where your strength comes from in that point. um do you think, because I always wonder, both of us overcame all about the stuff, the drugs and all the crime and all the stuff we did at younger ages. I wasn't really physically addicted. I was just a miserable, hopeless person. All the trouble and everything I got into. I was emotionally attached to drugs. And so when I started following God, things started really changing. I didn't have that desire there. Do you think it traces back to when you're young, or is it's just like this is just something in your body? You drink alcohol, you can't. You see what I'm saying? I always try to trace back a lot of the trouble I got into to what caused me to feel that way. It doesn't seem like there's really a causal in alcohol. It just seems like some people can handle it and some people can't. Do you get what I'm saying? It doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
mean this guy has a tough childhood or all the other alcoholics. Matter of fact, one of the most successful guys in the town that I live in, this guy gave up alcohol at 23, 24 years old. He's one of the most successful businessmen in town. He still goes to AA meetings, I think once a week. Matter of fact, he posts what he his whole story about once a year, 6 months a year on social media, and puts his phone number on there for people to call. So he didn't
Lovely.
have some deep seated, type miserable trauma growing up. I mean, he had lost his father at a young age. But I'm just wondering, do most people have that, or is it something like alcohol is just like drugs? It's a, you
Look,
see where
it's
I'm
like,
going?
yeah, there's different schools of thought, right? And I think it's different for different people, right? Like, definitely for some people, there's that kind of trauma basis lying underneath it. The drugs, the alcohol becomes a way to medicate those kind of deeper wounds, pains, sadnesses, for sure. The other thing that is really important to bear in mind is, like, essentially drinking alcohol is pleasurable, right? Like, people have been kind of getting high or getting drunk or getting stoned in different ways for thousands of years, right? We're, as creatures, we're designed to move towards things that are pleasurable, right? But the problem is with things like alcohol, cocaine, heroin, all the sort of substances which can become problematic and misused, right? Like, is that they radically alter over time, sometimes not over time, sometimes very quickly, but they radically alter the brain chemistry. So you can become dependent, and end up with a habit forming around that substance. That can happen very quickly, right? So look, for some people, I think it's yes, there's definitely pain in the background, which is being medicated. For other people, no, there isn't. There is, arguments and lots of research and debate about the genetic basis of alcoholism or addiction, right? But more importantly, like, for and kind of bringing it back to your man, right? Like, it's like, actually none of that really matters right now. None of that really matters, right? What matters is what he does about it. So I liken it like this, Pat, right? And I explain this to the people I work with quite often, right? It's like, if you're in a house, right? If you're on the top floor of a house and that house is on fire, yeah, what you do not need to do is figure out how the fire started. Yeah. You need to get out. Yeah. Like, you need to get out of the house. Sitting there thinking about how this fire broke out. I wonder if it broke out in the kitchen. Maybe it was because I left the stove on. It could be. Or actually, did so and so, like, discard a lit cigarette into the bin? They thought it was out, but that's caused the bin. No one cares. Do you know what I mean? You definitely shouldn't care. What you need is to get out. You need some help to get out. Right. And then once you're out and the fire's been put out, maybe you go and look in the embers and you do the investigation and you try and figure out what happened. Some people do, some people don't. Some people need to, some people don't. I think there's broadly three types of people in AA, whatever A, right? There's broadly three types of people. There's people that can come in, they can work through the steps, and they're going to be okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, fine, they're going to live a nice, happy life. They'll be healed. Like, the alcoholism, the active symptoms of alcoholism will be removed, right? They'll live a nice, happy life. They'll be fine. Do you know what I mean? Then there's another type of person that they're going to work through the steps, but because of that underlying kind of wounding, trauma, whatever you want to call that, they're going to need to do some other stuff. They're going to need to dig into it. They're going to need to find out what's underneath that. Otherwise, they're not going to stay sober, right? And then you get people somewhere in the middle that, like, they'll probably stay sober if they work the steps, but they might need a bit of help as well if they're really going to be able to enjoy their lives. Do you know what I mean? Figuring out which one of those types of people you are, that comes later. Right now you need to be sober. If I'm working with someone that's new, like brand new through the door, in the same scenario that's been outlined in that post, like, I'm not looking to find out why for a while. What I want to do is help them to figure out what they're going to do about it. Be that go to meetings, be that going to rehab, whatever it needs to be. Do what you need to do to get sober. The rest of it you can figure out later.
One other question: and I don't know how to phrase this. Do you focus? There are people that think, you have family, you have children. Do you focus on, I got to do this for them, or is it, I got to do this for me? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, great question, Pat. So look, the age-old wisdom has been, and you will hear this said many times, particularly if you spend time around AA or whatever group, right, is that if you're not doing it for yourself, it's not going to work, right?
Right. That's
Now,
what I thought.
I would I I have a slightly different take on that, right? So most people, or a significant proportion of people walking through the doors of a 12-step meeting, they're probably not in a place where they're like, oh, you know what? Like, I really believe that I'm worth more. I really believe on a deep felt level that I'm better than this. Yeah. And like, because I believe and back myself so much, I want to make this change for me. You know what I mean? I don't think that's most people when they walk through those doors. What pushes people through those doors of a meeting or a clinic or a rehab center, whatever it might be, what pushes people through those doors will often be consequences, loss of something, job, family, yeah, like, and the desire to avoid those consequences. Right? It may well
But
be
this guy's on the verge of it.
yeah, it may well be that family, it's like there's been an ultimatum. You need to go and get well, or else dot dot dot. Whatever gets people through the doors gets people through the doors. Yeah. But like once you're there, hopefully, through the hope and the love that you will experience there, you will start to shift and think, actually, you know what, like, I want this. I heard a story once. I heard it on a recorded share, which was what called a share, someone telling their story. But many years ago, it was on a CD. Back when, so there would be share CDs that would be kind of handed around and, copied and stuff like that. And it was a lady from LA, and she was a crack addict, right? And she got sentenced to do 90 meetings in 90 days, which you guys do over there, which hasn't really caught on over here. You find it some places, but it hasn't really caught on over here. Anyway, her story was until day 89, yeah. Until day 89, she sat in these meetings and she hated being there, man. She was like, I just can't wait to get out. Yeah. Get my thing, get my final meeting shit signed. Yeah, like court slip, right? Get out from under this kind of stipulation, and then I'm going back out, and then I'm going to hit that pipe, right? And she said on day 90, she sat in that meeting and she looked around and she thought, you know what? Oh, I feel really emotional saying it. She said, you know what? What these people in here have got going on looks a lot better than what I've got going on out there, and I think I'm going to stick around. So I think it's whatever gets you through the door, Pat.
Your advice to this guy, anybody listening, and anybody starting going through this is to get up, get to those meetings. It seems like when I've had trouble way back in my life, it was like win today. Just win today. Do it right today. Go 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. If you have a fall, jump back up and get a streak of winning again. Is that your focus is get into the meetings, reach out, get as much help. What would your final thing to say to this guy?
Say this right. It's like levels of care. It's like if you go to the emergency room, what we call accident and emergency, right? They're going to triage you. Yeah. They're going to work out whether you need some bandages. Yeah. Whether you need a doctor to look at you and kind of do some medication, or whether you need to be admitted. Yeah. And go up to the fourth floor and get some treatment. Right. Go to meetings, reach out, make friends, build a support network, get a sponsor, work the steps, do all of those things. Yeah. If that doesn't work, get some professionals involved. If you've got insurance, use that. Whatever you need to do, yeah. But like, you might want to get a counsellor. You might need to go to rehab. But the starting point is like just get to those meetings, do all the things they tell you to do. If that doesn't work, reevaluate. You might need more help. But right now, it's getting to those meetings.
Well, that's good advice. This guy can overcome. Anybody listening, anybody that has family, friends that are going through this, they can all overcome. And the seriousness of this, I certainly know because my older brother and my younger sister both drank themselves to death.
Oh, Pat,
They literally drank themselves to death.
I'm sorry, man.
So I don't, that's okay. It's down, it's, it, watered down. They, the thing is, the consequences are high. I don't know any 75-year-old alcoholics. You win it or it beats you. So I
Yeah,
think what you're saying is whatever you have to do, get up there and win that day and do it. And then the joy. to bring it back to the overcoming, you were one of that. I was just commenting when we started the day how the big smile on your face. You're getting married in a few. I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, but you're 13 years sober, right?
Yeah, yeah, man.
What was it?
And it's not been, it's not been easy, but it's been great.
Right,
It's, I'm one of those people. I needed extra help. I carried a lot of pain into recovery, into my sobriety. Um,
right,
that caused me some difficulties, as you know, but ultimately it led me to Jesus, right? That's a huge thing. All of that stuff led me to Jesus. Yeah, and that was where the magic, probably not the best choice of words, but that's where it really, really started to happen. But like in the meantime, before all of that, even in the midst of, some difficulties and stuff, like for me to not use drugs, right? I use drugs every day from the age of 14 onwards, maybe 13. Definitely by the time I was 14, I was using something. I was getting high on something every single day. Alcohol is a huge part of my story, but then everything else as well: cocaine, crack cocaine, heroin, cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. For me to have that obsession, that murderous obsession to use and drink removed, was nothing short of a miracle. I traveled the world. I built a great career. I made lots of friends. I had no one. I had no one left in my life. No one cared. Well, people cared, but they were so hurt. That they'd retreated. I, angered people, stolen from people, robbed my parents' peace of mind. So then to be able to build a life, which is, I have safety, security, a roof over my head, love, friendships, like choices. I'm not waiting for the door to come through with like the police or drug dealers I owe money to. I'm not waiting, that's not how I live today. Yeah, so yeah, the joy, the transformation is remarkable, and yeah, I'm praying for your guy, man. I'm praying for him.
I'm praying for him too. My wife is praying for him, and I know people hear the thoughts and prayers. I promise you, praying for people even that you don't know make a difference. There was a thing in my book I mentioned the day I walked down that street when it was raining and I ran into this guy. I'm coming back from a college football game and I've run out of gas. There's a guy standing on the side of the road and asked me how I'm doing and who I am. We talked for a second. He says, "Well, I know who you are." He says, "We've been praying for you." There were people in this house that had heard my name, and I have no doubt that that had a lot to do with the miracle that happened in my life. So, uh, to our guy that we're talking about, we're praying for him. My wife's praying for him. Other people too. He can do this and he can overcome. So I appreciate you sharing that. And before we go, Rich, speaking of overcoming, I want to tell you an amazing story um, about overcoming. On the intro, you listen to the intro and the outro music to our podcast. You hear the
Yeah.
cool funk, jazz, fusion that comes in there. Well, there's an amazing story behind that. The guy playing that is a guy named Michael Abernathy. And he has a band called Abernathy, and you can find his music anywhere that it's out there. He's got several other songs. Really talented guy. And let me share his story with you. February 23rd, 2004, he's 34 years old. He has, he's married for, I don't know how long he'd been married, but had a 2 week old son. He is an accomplished musician by night. He's worked with some big name guys, big name folks, and he is working construction during the day, and he's up in the roofs about a 3 story house in one of the more prestigious neighborhoods in my hometown of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He falls through that roof 30 feet onto his head. They don't think he's going to make it, but they rush him to the emergency room. They do an emergency craniotomy on him. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. His head was like twice the size of normal, but the doctor's thinking he shouldn't live. He's got a vein gushing blood, so they can't work on it. You can't work when there's blood gushing in his vein, and he died during the surgery. But when he died, the blood stopped gushing. So the doctor was able to sew the vein back up, but he was dead. He flatlined. So they brought him back to life. And they, whatever the shock, somehow they shocked him back to life. And the doctor said no one had ever flatlined, no one had ever died and come back to life with him like that. But he has this severe brain injury, and he can't function. He's good chance he's going to be an invalid for the rest of his life. And he comes out of the hospital. He does have a wife, but he's needing round-the-clock care. Probably going to need that round-the-clock care for the rest of his life. But he's having trouble. He needs help. He has a walker or wheelchair. He's having episodes where he has to go to the emergency room. And one day his wife takes him to the emergency room, and he's sitting in a wheelchair. And he had gone through like 9 months of his life, just disappeared. From the time he had that accident, he didn't remember anything for 9 months. It just all of a sudden it picks back up. Remember, 2-year-old kid that he's not able to play with or enjoy or be with. But his wife takes him to the emergency room, and he sees his wife down the hallway gesturing wildly with the doctors or the nurses. And that's all he remembers. He sees that. And then he sees his wife turn and walk away. And that's the last he saw her. She just walked out and left. He's in the hospital. And he's sitting there. He has no phone. He has no money. He has nowhere to go. Nobody to take care of him. And so they stabilize him and take him to the local Salvation Army. And so he's at the Salvation Army, and that's a homeless shelter.
We have that.
Basically,
Yeah.
It's basically a homeless shelter, and they flew him, from the homeless shelter. They his brother, I think, found out and came and got him, and then flew him out to California. His brother, I think, lived in Seattle, Washington. Flew him out to California. And he's staying with his stepfather, so he takes him to stay with his stepfather. His mother died at the age of 21. He's already had a bit of a tough go of it. Oh, and he had already overcome drug addiction himself. He had a bad cocaine problem. He had already overcome a lot in life, but he's doing well at this point when he has this massive traumatic brain injury. But he's left in this basically homeless shelter. His brother flies him out to stay with his stepfather. Well, his stepfather has this evil stepmother who's a meth head. When the stepfather's not around, she's giving him a hard time. She doesn't like him. She doesn't want him in the house. He caught her doing meth. He saw her doing meth, and she knew it, and she wanted him out of the house. So they put him into a care home in California. Well, some of these care homes, they can call them a care home all they want, but what they are is they're there to suck money out of people, and they're there to suck workman's comp and government money out of them. Because he said he spent 14 years in this care home in California, and he said it was 14 years of living hell. He said they were pumping him full of drugs. They had no intention of trying to rehab him or trying to help him out. He's stuck in this home. He's using a walker. He can't hardly walk. They pump him full of drugs. He's fighting the drugs. Remember, this guy's a drug addict from the past. He overcame that. He doesn't need to be pumped full of drugs, but he's fighting. And he's still fighting the drugs, and he's still thinking, I can beat this. He knows he has this 2-week-old son, and he keeps thinking, I've got to somehow get out of this. I've got to somehow get through this so I can see my son again. He said that was to be a father that he could be proud of. But 14 years in an institutionalized home, when on the inside of your mind, you're still functioning. You just know that you need some help, but they're not helping him. He starts taking classes. He gets a bass, so he's playing bass. But, 14 years is a long time. A lot of Christmases, a lot of summers, a lot of falls that are passing. So he starts taking, classes, and he's trying to help, but he's still on a walker. He's still being left. They've given up on him. They've institutionalized him, and it happens all over the place. I don't know if it happens in England, but it happens in America. If there's money coming in, they benefit from you being in that bed and
Yeah,
in
of
that
course.
room, then
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah. We
graduate
have.
you and putting you back on your life. But there is one woman in there, one nurse, that sees the progress, that sees the light inside of his eyes, that sees the hope, and she helps him come back closer to Mississippi where his son is. So they move him to Covington, um, Louisiana. So in Covington, Louisiana, they do start helping him. They do start trying to rehab him. They thought that they could help. They said this was it was a place where they were really trying to get him better. And he starts getting better, and he starts helping. He starts teaching classes in the place. So he's now starting to come out. He's still in a wheelchair, and he's there for about 4 years. But remember, he has no control. He can't leave. He's still a ward. I mean, he's wherever people are going to put him, and he has nowhere to go. Wife just left him in the emergency room. So he starts teaching classes, and he starts making a difference in people's lives. He starts telling the guy in the wheelchair where your arms work, but he's an encourager. So he starts doing this, and then he gets to the point where the place in Covington says, we think you can maybe go to graduate out to another facility because you're making progress. Well, that actually turned out to be a dark moment because they sent him to a place in Ponchatoula where they kind of put you up in an apartment, but you can't leave it. They've got cameras on you, and your workman's comp still paying the money. And there was a woman there running the place that zero rehab, zero anything, not trying to help this guy at all. And she's fighting to keep him there. And he's wanting to get out. And matter of fact, she's taunting him, talking about you can't, you're not going to believe you did this and you did that, but you're still here. And so now he's back going through hell, and he can't get out of this place. And he's at this place for several more years, but he's still fighting, and he's still believing that he can get out of this. So one day he contacts an attorney, and he finds out he doesn't really have a guardian. He doesn't really have anybody that's put him there. These facilities have just made decisions, and the healthcare professionals have just moved him to each facility and then on to the next facility. So he hires an attorney, and the attorney comes back and says, you have no guardian. And the attorney starts working, starts filing papers, and the attorney picks up the phone, calls him one day and says, it's over. Pack your stuff. He said, I'm coming for you. And the guy said there's two of the greatest days in his life was the one when his child was born, the second one when the guy called and said, it's over. I'm coming to get you. That was a year and a half ago. The guy's in a walker. He can barely, it can still take him 10 minutes to get across the parking lot. That guy goes and gets him, brings him up to Hattiesburg, my hometown, where I met him about a year and a half ago. When I met him, he walked with a walker. He couldn't walk. You could tell his speech was impaired. 6 months later, this dude is out walking the golf course, playing 9 holes of golf, dragging his bag. He's playing the bass again. He's functioning on his own. He's put together a band, and he's playing this music. And I start hearing this music. I don't know who it is. I'm like, well, who is that? That's me. That's you. With this cool jazz funk fusion that we're listening to. Yeah, that's me. It's 6 months later, he's improving more and more. Now he's got his band. He's got his life back. He's back talking to his kid. They left him for dead, and they left him as an invalid. And this guy is functioning so well that I was going to mention his story because he was kind enough to give us this music for free to listen to. And I called the dude up just to make sure that I get the story straight. But he has to call me back an hour and a half later because he's outside in 100-degree Mississippi heat, mowing his yard and weed eating his yard. That
Amazing.
is amazing and
Yeah, no,
overcoming. So that's
yeah, that's It's
Good.
great. It's amazing story, and sad,
So,
a lot of loss in there, damning indictment of the care system. And yeah, we have the same kind of stuff happens in our care homes. Same kind of stuff happens in addiction treatment sometimes. I think there's bad actors in every industry, and when people are vulnerable, sometimes they can get exploited. So, if you're not getting the care you need, um, remember you've always got options. Thankfully, in the end, he found someone that could help him understand what he's worth. So that's amazing. Thanks, Pat, for sharing that.
well, and the key is, as he said to me, never give up, never quit. He said, I knew the day I gave up is the day I lost. And that's the same message that we have for our friend from the sports message board that I'm talking about, and the same message that we have for everybody else is
Absolutely.
never give up, never quit. And when we end this today, if whoever's listening, if you take about 20 seconds and listen to the outro music, it's called 15 Minutes Tonight. There's about a 20-second clip, and just remember, you're not just listening to some really cool jazz funk fusion. You're listening to the sound of victory and the sound of not giving up and the sound of overcoming. And that's Michael Abernathy. And you can find him, the band Abernathy, on any of the music. And congratulations, Michael. Way to go, dude. Rich, good to see you, man. We'll talk again next week.
See you next week, Pat. God bless you, man, and God bless to everyone that's listening.
All right. All right. Take care, buddy.
Take care. Bye.